1910s, a decade dominated and defined by the First World War. The parachute, pop-up toaster, and a submachine gun were all inventions that shook the world. Jumping out of planes for an adrenaline rush, or dropping from high altitude on a military mission, would have been impossible before the bravery of one humble coal miner. In 1912, Greenville, Pennsylvania, Stefan Banich had just finished another shift on the mine. He was daydreaming about a better life when a tragedy right in front of him changed his life completely. A plane fell out of the sky and crash landed. The pilot didn't stand a chance because he didn't have a parachute. The incident haunted Banich, but also fueled his inventive mind. A Slovakian immigrant, he had studied engineering at night school, hoping it would free him from his life as a laborer.
With his personality, a fixer, a solver of problems, he started to think of ways that the pilot could have been saved.
Only 9 years earlier, the Wright brothers had taken their first flight. The early airplanes were dangerous and often broke down in mid-air. Banich realized aviation was the way of the future, if only it could be made safer.
Everybody else was working on getting up in the air. Stefan Banich apparently thought there ought to be a way that when that contraption falls out of the air, that we can get the pilot back to the ground safely.
The idea of a parachute was not new, but nobody had developed a design that worked and could be patented. The arrival of the airplane inspired several designs in the early 20th century, including a parachute in a backpack, but none was successful. In 1912, Frenchman Franz Reichelt suffered a terrible fate with his hand-sewn silk wings concept. He leapt off the top of the Eiffel Tower, but his wings didn't work, and he died in front of hundreds of spectators. Banich thought future tragedies could be prevented with better engineering.
You had to have something, obviously, if you're falling through the air. What would you have to slow that fall down? So it would have to be some type of thing like an umbrella or a conical shape that, in fact, would capture the air and create resistance.
Banich thought a parachute would work using drag. First, he had to design a device that would open so that it trapped air underneath, which would create air resistance, or drag, and dramatically slow the speed of his fall, allowing for safe landing. Banich began to build his parachute. He used canvas for the canopy and sewed it by hand. He attached poles that could expand and contract, similar to a telescope.
It had a harness on the hips, and then these rods, when he would open it, it would come up using his arms, and then it would extend on telescopic poles. You would use your arms to deploy the parachute, so to speak. Kind of the reverse. We'd think of an umbrella, we'd hang under it. In this case, he put it underneath the arms because that way he at least had some control of whether it stayed open or not.
Banich was ready to test his prototype. A man in a skirt on the beams of a barn wasn't something his neighbors were used to witnessing.
Are you all right, mister?
He suffered a few bumps and bruises, but the chute did slow his fall.
Yeah, I can imagine a neighbor seeing, the local guy jumping off the roof of his barn. He'd probably run downtown and say, come on out, there's a crazy guy out here jumping off the barn.
With each additional jump, he improved his design. He made the parachute larger, as more surface area meant he could trap more air, which increased the chute's resistance to the force of gravity. However, to obtain a patent, he had to prove that it worked from a much greater height. So he planned a very public and very risky demonstration, leaping from the top of a building in Washington within sight of the US Patent Office. On the 3rd of June 1914, Banach prepared to jump off the roof.
I think anybody that jumps a parachute has confidence that it's going to open. He believed in himself, believed in his design, so he was willing to make the jump.
The descent was perfect. The publicity stunt worked as Banach got a patent for his parachute. It was an achievement that also attracted the attention of the US military.
The Army became very interested in a device or the concept of getting a pilot out of a broken airplane to the ground safely. First World War did that. They found out when they lost pilots, they couldn't replace them, and they had to find a solution.
So Banach offered his patent to the US Army. His reward was a lifetime membership in the Army Air Corps. The military modified his parachute, making it more practical for airmen, and it soon became standard issue for US pilots.
I always